Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. The webinar is entitled Intelligence versus Wisdom, the Importance of the Single Customer View. The webinar today is being brought to us by BlueVenn and List Services Corporation. List Services and BlueVenn are partners. BlueVenn provides a software package called Blue Analyzer. We have many customers in the US and here in Europe. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Jim Kelly, who's going to be doing the presentation today. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. In this session, which should last about 45 to 50 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about something that we try to articulate to our clients over several conversations, not crammed into 45 minutes. So there's a lot of content here, and I really want to talk about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, and why the latter, wisdom, is by far the best result to aim for, and how we're going to get there. There's quite a bit to get through, and hopefully you'll find at least some of it, if not all of it, relevant, useful, and thought-provoking. So, excuse me, for many years, there's been significant talk in the industry with marketeers and database vendors and technologists and everything else on the term customer intelligence and what customer intelligence is and how you get at it. Many organizations have gathered data, they've built databases and data marts, as you might call it, and they've worked flat out to try to turn data into valuable assets to form the foundation of their customer intelligence. In this webinar, I'll be discussing how, with some pretty fundamental changes in how we approach this, we can go one further than just basic customer intelligence. You can provide your business with true customer wisdom. Wisdom is subtly different than intelligence. By far, it is more valuable. I'll explain why. Wisdom is the right blend of knowledge, experience, fueling good judgment. It's not only about knowledge or intelligence, they're part of it, of course, but they are just a part. It's mostly about the good judgment piece on the right-hand side. If you delve a little deeper, as we can see here, and into how we can power good judgment, it all makes a lot more sense. The good judgment is brought about by being informed and considered in your decision. Knowledge isn't just about facts. The real benefit actually comes from turning facts into useful information and using our skills to interpret the information and make it more valuable. Experience is, of course, it's quite key. It's what marketers draw upon is their history of practical contact that they've had with similar events or experiences that allows them to iteratively learn and therefore improve their experience. Subsequently, they get much better at it. So basically, at all times, we're trying to use our experience to actually turn our facts into being more informed to inform decision. So we're always trying to get towards wisdom. We're always trying to achieve wisdom. But typically, we start with what we call intelligence. Well, what happens if you introduce bad facts into your equation? We introduce unclean data or bad interpretation of the data. What if the data isn't relevant or doesn't quite belong there? Well, the information you derive from those bad facts becomes inaccurate as we create knowledge gaps. It's at this point that you realize we still have intelligence. This is quite a key part of this. We still have intelligence at this point. It's just that it's not very accurate. It has gaps. The result, however, is that we're misinformed, and as marketeers, we don't make bad judgments, of course. We're marketeers. We make misguided judgments. Misguided judgments which are based on misinformation. But as I say, we still have intelligence. So what we're going to do in this webinar is really concentrate on the pure fundamentals and remind ourselves of how we get there. We're going to actually take a look at how we can create a foundation for knowledge which is based on trustworthy facts that generates a valuable and relevant asset to inform decision. We want to empower wisdom. Whenever I speak to clients that I've interacted with over the years about customer knowledge, marketers typically talk about relationships, more so over the most recent years. How do I get involved in the relationship? How do I get involved in the customer journey? Improving relationships and how they can get involved in the customer journey are really key facets which all marketers are beginning, if not have been for years, to talk about. But before you can understand what the customer is doing, you need to identify who they are. In our personal relationships, kind that we have with family, friends, or colleagues, we naturally draw upon information we've built up over the years with them. We draw upon our memories, if you like, to identify what we know about them, what others know, how they behave, where they live, and what we've actually talked about in the past. Our shared memories are what defines our relationship. The shared memories that we have with a customer are very similar. They just have different names. Whether the data actually comes from existing internal customer databases, third parties, order processing systems, or behavioral events, such as website browsing history, complaints, or returns. We should be able to, as humans, identify how we can build up the data we acquire to get a really good picture of who the customer is and what they like, what they do, and subsequently how they do it. Once we've worked through the data available to us and we've made the connection to the customer, we must then acknowledge a very simple fact, and that is that everything we know about that customer will change. It will change over time. If you take, for example, James Robert Smith here, his name is James Robert Smith. He's clearly, that's his name on his birth certificate. He's been our customer for quite a while. James, however, does touch our brand in a number of different ways. He hits our brand through different channels, websites, and other relationships. Moreover, the more data sources that store information about James, the more likely it is that we will see James represent himself in different ways. Here are examples of how James Robert Smith might actually call himself when he touches your brand. James might actually call himself anything he wants at any given point in our relationship. One week he might be James, the next he might be James. He can call himself what he wants. They might have a home address, a shipping address, a work address, and more. They might have vanity names for these addresses. The fact that he calls his house the Dingles won't necessarily mean anything to you or other marketers in your team, but it may mean an awful lot to him. He might call it the Dingles. So it's quite key that we use the Dingles when we address him. Every contact channel you have for this individual can yield different data. And again, all of it can actually change over time. Moving house is the most specific example. If he moves house, it changes his home phone number, your database needs to be as nimble and as ever-changing as the customers you have. One of the key aspects about the ever-changing human is the only piece of information which will not change about you is your date of birth. You can change your forename, your surname, your gender, your job, your address, your home phone number, your mobile phone number. You can have multiples. You can have several email addresses. The only thing that won't change is your date of birth. So understanding that what you're trying to represent is a single customer view will make you understand how nimble your actual database must be. But before I talk about how we need to gather data from multiple sources and how we actually make this work, I just want to take a moment to reflect on people, actual people, humans. There are some organizations that have very different ways of dealing with their customers. Energy suppliers, for example, they tend to treat the household or premises as the actual customer. They will have an individual that pays the bill, of course, but the household is the consumer of their product. Media publishers, particularly newspapers the whole world over, have been struggling with this for quite a while. They send newspapers to your house. The house is the subscriber. A person just pays the bill. So each of these organizations who treat the individual customer as a household, or rather treat the household as a customer, they tend to miss out on a lot of the information that we take for granted when we have personal relationships. And a lot of those organizations, a lot of those industries are starting to change how they address who is the customer. If you take Amazon as an example, I have two daughters, both of whom regularly buy things from Amazon using my account. As a result, I am constantly recommended Disney DVDs or young teen books or 7-year-old books. They're books aimed at 7 or 11-year-old girls. I'd like to be able to have different personas, if you want, on Amazon. So I can tell Amazon who I am. Sometimes I'm the marketing consultant, and I'd like business recommendations. Sometimes I'm daddy, and I need to buy daddy DVDs. But really, am I the same person at the same time? So understanding who is the customer is quite key. No matter how you ship, build, or supply your products or services, a customer database should first and foremost hold individuals. It should hold people. You can, of course, and you should, structure your database to provide household information and account information as well. But when you talk to a customer, remember you're talking to a person, not a house. So with all these bits of data flying around from all over the business, how do we make sure that it ends up in the right place? Excuse me, I need a quick sip of water. If you take, for example, thinking back to real-life relationships and how people interact with each other, there are many different environments in which you can learn things about a person. The only thing that links them together is your ability is to remember that they are the same person. You'll interact with one person in many different ways. In the database world, we link data together where we can, using what's called a common key. Sometimes, however, it can be as complex as having to match data, match individual records across data sources using disconnected keys, or do what's called fuzzy matching, those sorts of things. And matching and de-duplication is something I will come on to a little bit later. But for now, I just want to talk about what happens when you take data from all over the place, which is really where your memories of your interactions with your customers exist. If you take, for example, our existing customer database, where all our customers exist, if this is the only source of customer data you have, then you probably don't have any problems at all creating a single customer view from it. It is, for all intents and purposes, already a single customer view. It has one record per customer. In reality, however, most organizations have several different transactional or operational systems, databases that hold customer information, that power, eventually, this wisdom of yours. If I take from the existing customer database some of the finance system and some from any other number of data sources, I'll be able to build up an exhaustive list of every individual in my marketing ecosystem. Customers, prospects, lapsed customers, complainers, recommenders, everyone that touches my brand will be in there. That's my top table. With customer data, I can also ameliorate the value of my customer data by introducing the electoral roll or creating a household level or third-party data sources like suppression or geodemographics. And from that, I can build my household level. Now, then the exciting part comes. By adding transactional data and linking it all together, and obviously right now I'm doing this conceptually, doing this in my head, where do all my facts actually come from? But when I introduce my transactional information, website behavior, contact history, campaign data, and other events across my business, I can end up with an awful lot of data. Key thing is, it's data. It's not information, not yet. There are certain things that I should think about for each and every piece of data that I even consider putting into this knowledge base of mine. Governance and preparation are key. I'll go into these slightly more on the next slide, but for this, it's really key for me to articulate that when I'm trying to create a view of a relationship with my customers, I have pieces of data all over the place. I've got my customer database, my finance database, refunds, returns, email, click-throughs, everything. So what I need to understand is, I've got all this, how do I join it together? And how do I make it valuable? So with the governance and preparation element, there are, for every individual piece of information, I need to identify whether or not I can pass certain checkpoints. Firstly, am I legally able to store, maintain, and use this data? Looking at the bottom one first. There are certain pieces of information that you're not permitted to hold. The simplest example will be credit card. Unless you have a specific license, you're typically not permitted to hold credit card. But there are other pieces of information that legally you may not be able just to store. Secondly, is it trustworthy? So should I trust this data source over another source with the same data? I will give you an example. If you book a vacation and you book it online, and they're going to email you your airline tickets through your email address that you provide them, there's pretty much a 99.99% chance that the email address you provide that website is going to be accurate. Because you want your e-ticket, you want your airline ticket. So you're going to give accurate information. So I could trust that data source implicitly. But of course, when you're traveling home on your vacation and one of the cabin crew hands you a little card and says, what did you think of your flight? Was everything good for you? Did you enjoy your vacation? You might fill it out. At the bottom it says, provide your email address so we can contact you in the future. You're never going to put that in the right email address. So clearly you have two different sources of email address. One is more trustworthy than the other. The third element is it accurate and clean? Do you need to do any cleansing on the data before it's usable? Perhaps you do. Perhaps you need to amend it in some way to make it more usable within your single customer view. The next question is it marketing ready? Should it be from the customer's perspective or mine? And I do cover this off in a little more detail soon, so I'm going to skip that one for now, but that's quite key for me. Customer perspective is one of the big differences between wisdom and intelligence. The next question is it structured? Can I use it in analysis or queries, and will it power targeting? Which is fundamentally what you want to do. You want to understand what your customers are doing. You want to take the information. You want to turn it around and shape it into some form that allows you to gain revenue from it or drive additional conversation. At all times, we're trying to create usable, clean, accurate, and trustworthy data. And these governance and preparation steps will help us get there for every single data source that we have. So I just want to go on about the importance of one. A single customer view is just that. Earlier on, I briefly mentioned matching and de-duplication. So how do we get to a single customer view, and why is it so important? I cannot impress enough the importance of being able to match, merge, and deduplicate customer records so as to create this usable, clean, accurate, and trustworthy data asset that you so need. If you take this example, Mr. Jim Smith, he's just placed an order with us for a product. He places his order and we receive his details. Firstly, we try to match him to the existing list of customers that we have. That's our black line at the top. That's our existing customer database. This helps us to ascertain his value, any offers available to him, and to fuel any other marketing decisions we may need to make. So in this example, Mr. Jim Smith doesn't actually match any specific individual. So because our match rate, our match threshold in our process doesn't match him at all, we treat him as a new customer. We create a new record and we begin an acquisition campaign. We're excited. We've got a new customer. Our welcome messaging begins. Problem is, however, that because we didn't clean his data on the way into the process, not only have we inappropriately matched old drive, you can see his address there is old drive, but it's a non-existent address. It's quite simplistic, I know, but a pretty valid example nonetheless. Because he mistyped his address, he doesn't match, and we can't ship him his product. But we still quite happily take his money because his credit card number was valid. So let's try this again. Only this time, we'll cleanse his data and we'll affect the address the appropriate way. We'll try to increase the possibility, not too far though, that his record will match our existing customer database. We find that Jim Smith is an existing customer with a significant value and that we can begin a more appropriate conversation with him. Our ability to cleanse and match begins with the data accuracy at the platform level. Clean data wins always. Cleaning the data, the better the match rate, the better the customer intelligence derived, and the better the wisdom you can furnish. When the single customer view creates a copy of a customer record because of bad matching, because it cannot accurately match it against an existing customer, we create what's called a duplicate. And duplicates can be bad news. The example we just saw only serves to highlight the importance of badly matching data across our databases and the various issues that it creates. But here are some much more relevant real-life examples of duplicates that I've experienced and encountered throughout the interactions that I've had with my clients. If we cannot accurately match incoming data within our single customer view, these are the kind of things that happen. Acquisition campaigns are more likely to create duplicates. We don't acquire as many customers as we think we do. We overrepresent our success and potentially give offers to new customers that aren't in fact new at all because we've created duplicates. All this, and not to mention the damage it does to our relationship. Effectively, we've forgotten that we had a relationship with the customer and we think they're an acquisition target. For retention, the effect is similar. We cannot accurately target retention messages if we don't know who we're actually targeting. Bad offers, bad metrics, and bad churn are pretty much common. Segmentation can be a total disaster. We gain insight, but not only on our customers, but on the duplicates that we've created as a part of the bad matching process. We've created insight on customers that don't exist, or rather they do exist, but they only existed once. We'll never truly understand their buying behavior, and therefore we make too many assumptions, we have too many gaps in our knowledge on how the segment should perform and how we can affect it. Campaigns with many duplicate customers are simply an exercise in wasting money and reducing response rate. If I exist twice on your database, it costs you twice as much to contact me, and I am not going to respond twice because I'm one person. So not only have you paid double to contact me, but you've halved your possible response rate for me personally. There are, of course, another side of duplicates, which is what we call false positives. This is when the single customer view matching process, the threshold is actually set too low, and we merge customer records together that aren't actually the same person. This in itself creates other problems. So finally on this subject, let's take a quick look at the balance between having duplicates or creating false positives. Duplicates do create problems. We've already seen that, and I've spoken about that briefly. False positives indeed do as well, but they are slightly different. Whereas with duplicates, we incorrectly increase the size of our database because we're creating more than one customer. With false positives, we incorrectly reduce our database because we're merging records together. That shouldn't be merged. They both affect metrics, and our ability to accurately use the data is affected. But the key message is this. If you send a communication to a duplicate customer, you'll annoy them because you sent the same message twice, and you will affect your metrics. If you send a communication to the wrong person because you've merged them with someone else, you may actually get your organization into a lot of trouble. You take, for example, where one customer on your database is opted out of all communications. They're a do not contact. And you later merge their record with another customer that has not opted out. You may think the customer is safe to communicate to, but of course they aren't. And depending upon which state you're in or which country you're in, there are quite serious fines for every single infringement of these sorts of data errors. So essentially, it is always better to have more duplicates than false positives. Better. It's about getting the match threshold just right and optimizing the process iteratively to get it as close to perfect as you possibly can. This next area, in my opinion, is one of the most important and yet singularly overlooked aspects of creating a single customer view platform that powers wisdom. If the whole purpose of a single customer view is to power better informed decision, it is key that it contains information and not just data. The perspective you build into your single customer view can define the conversation you have with your customers. It will fundamentally change how you speak. I am well aware, by the way, that many of you watching this do not come from a retail vertical, but I have chosen predominantly retail examples in this just to explain what I mean by perspective. The assumption from my perspective is that we all buy stuff, we all buy things, so retail kind of seems an obvious choice when a bunch of marketeers from different verticals are chatting together. So hopefully you'll be able to think of some examples within your own vertical, and it'll all make sense. The left-hand side, the red box, represents pure data. It's pure data. That's the data we get from the transactional system. To the right is the customer's perspective, which is what I'm advocating is a fundamental step change in how you treat intelligence versus risk. The data says an MX8732 was bought for $125. But how can I engage this customer to have a new conversation about her purchase when I don't actually know what she bought? I know what I sold, but I don't know what she bought. I sold an MX8732. She bought a black cocktail dress. Black cocktail dress might mean a whole different bunch of things to her. It might mean an expensive night out, a cocktail party, a weekend away. It's more than just a product code. If I'm going to engage her, I need to know what she was buying. So another example, actually, is that a well-known, prestigious retail store in London, you might know it, it only has one shop, and it's on that little corner in the middle of London. They sold several types of couch or sofa. They ranged in price, material, and size. They were essentially, though, all couches. The product categories that they had on their transaction system put them all under furniture, couches. That's where they sat. One of them, however, one of these couches was a hand-stitched Italian leather couch with handmade cushions. The couch would come in any color you chose and was made to order. You could even take in a photograph of something, and Harrods would match the color of the couch to an item in the photograph. There was one lady who took in a picture of a dog, and they made her a couch in hand-stitched Italian leather to match the color of a dog. That's not a couch. That's a centerpiece. That's a life-changing event. It's a prestige item. You need to know what the customer's buying. As a marketeer, my conversation is improved by knowing what the customer wants. Here are some other examples of perspective. It's really a key thing. I know many people that get into bed with a tablet. If they browse just before midnight and then they check out just after midnight, is that 2 separate days, or is that the same session? Transactionally, they bought on one day, they browsed on one day, and they bought the next. But session-wise, they didn't. It's one session. We might charge $100 for a product, but the customer has committed to part with $140. They haven't parted with $100. So it's quite key for me to understand that the customer spent $140. Default database values are a potential sort of nightmare. Be very careful of those. I have seen a lot of these where databases are built by IT departments and not by marketeers. They're not built by the input of marketeers. So you have default database values. They're frightening. And here's an interesting example, the last one. The returns rate is important for all kinds of reasons. But if my personal sister orders 3 of an identical product and returns 2, in her head, she's bought it. In this case, returning items is just a part of her purchase cycle. She hasn't returned anything. That's the way her head works. So if that's her head, I need to be able to actually engage with that. So we talked about where data can come from, how memories are key, and the fact that everything might change. We've talked about the importance of data cleansing and matching records. And of course, we briefly touched on perspective, which is a subject quite close to my heart. So how does it all fit together? What does a single customer view actually look like, and what do we need to think about when building that? A single customer view is essentially a database where the data has been collated from multiple sources, cleaned, de-duplicated, and merged to form a structured, accurate, trustworthy, and consolidated view of all customer data with one single record for a unique individual. It doesn't matter whether you're in B2B, B2C, or B2B2C, or whether you're in retail, finance, hospitality, or any other vertical. For the most part, the structure is roughly the same. What changes might be the outlying tables. It will be the data within it and the perspective you add, and of course, what you do with it. Fundamentally, they're all pretty much the same. At a minimum level, a single customer view should contain customer details, facts about the customer, descriptive elements about the customer, age ranges, age bands, all of those. Premises detail needs to know where they live. Even if you don't post to their house, it can help you with geodemographics or sociographics or third-party data that you actually buy in. The contact channel information needs to be represented for every channel. And it needs to be event-driven, not just channel-driven, so that you can see how the customer is interacting with each of the channels as part of their journey, not in isolation. The campaign contact history is key. You need to know what you sent them and when. It goes back to memories. What did I say to them, and what did they say to me? Transactions, has any money changed hands, what are their returns like, orders, payments, etc., etc. And really think about what they're buying. Really think about their interaction, their perspective. Add new columns to the marketing view, which represents customer perspective, not just organizational system. many other events and responses. You might have complaints, return rates. You might have all kinds of other elements, inbound calls, outbound calls. Try and make it fit within this principal structure. A good single customer will also have not only the data that you see as a marketeer, but it'll also have the raw data and the clean data, as well as the presented data. The reason for that is that there are times when you will want to see how was a record created. You will want to go back to the original raw data and say, well, what's the process of cleansing and de-duplication and merging that created this record for me? And it's actually, there are certain countries in the world, definitely within areas of Europe, it is, you are legally required to prove how you created that record and how you built that record up. So holding the raw data and the clean data can be quite important, how you actually trace the data through. The derivation rules are really specifications of where you've added your perspective, so that anybody who's coming up behind you as a marketeer, anyone who looks at the information can see that actually what you've done with this hand-stitched leather couch is you put it into another category called prestige items or life-changing purchases, so that you can specify the list of derives that you put within your structure. Data consolidation events is really about when you've changed your data, how you've ordered data. Again, that could be legally required depending upon the country in which you're operating, or even the state for that matter. And you need to think about subject access. If somebody contacts your business and says, can you provide me with all the information that you hold on me, you need to be able to provide that. The fundamental policy requirement if you're going to prove that you're handling customer data appropriately. So one of the key things to remember when we're talking about a database undertaking of this size is that there are a whole range of standard things that you need to think about. But the process is roughly the same no matter what horizontal or vertical you're in. You're trying to collect the data, prepare the data, merge records together. You want to structure it, and then create the presented view that includes your perspective and your single source of the truth. These are quite key processes, but they are nothing more than just ETL processes. Of all the engagements that we've ever had with organizations, which range from very small to very large, multinationals, multilinguals, any vertical, these are the kind of things that we think about. I'm not going to go through each one of these individually. The webinar is being recorded, so you can, of course, pause frame and print it off or do whatever it is you want to do with this slide. But ultimately, this slide tries to put a bit more tactical viewpoint into what we're trying to do. How do we make this a viable, trustworthy thing? So I will give you some examples. Bottom left, we've got salacious name screening. It is one of the most humorous things that you can do with your marketing team. They sit around and swear at each other, put the names in a database to make sure that nobody registers as a new customer with it inappropriately. Because the last thing you want to do is be in the local news having sent out a bunch of letters with swear words in. Salacious name screening, it needs to be there. You've got a whole different range of pieces of information here. So you need to really think about each of these elements for every single data source you receive. And the key thing is you treat each data source differently. No two data sources are as trustworthy as each other. Each data source has its own version of the truth. One of your key tasks is to create a single version of the truth. So treat each data source differently. Essentially, there are 6 logical parts to every single customer view. And it may help if you separate your thoughts as you're going through all of this and as you're thinking about this into these areas. They're quite logical in how they actually fit together. Essentially, the green elements typically belong to third parties. They're hygiene files about cleansing addresses and phone numbers. And they've got enhancement files about sociodemographics, geodemographics, those sorts of things. Suppression information. The blue elements at the bottom are really key because these represent the engine, the actual gears that lock together to build a single customer view for you in an ad hoc way. And it's quite key that you don't build this thing and then leave it for years. Because once you've built the single customer view, it's out of date the second you've built it. You need an automated single customer view process. That's why we have processes. Whether it updates monthly or weekly or daily is entirely dependent upon your business model, but you need it to constantly update itself. And the red section, top left, is your data. It's your existing data that we spoke about earlier. Data from everywhere. Memory from everywhere. These logical areas, ownership, can be quite a key thing that you're thinking about when you're actually thinking about building one of these. And it's quite important that you understand how your decisions are affected by who owns what. So there are your data, there's third-party data sources, and as their name implies, they're typically licensed or rented from third parties. But most outsourcing decisions tend to fall at this bottom piece. Do you build, do you buy, or do you rent? There are some important aspects to this decision that I'll briefly explain. If you build this yourself, you need to ensure that as a marketeer, you're heavily involved in the process, so that IT don't build a database only suitable for operational systems. It's a marketing database. It needs to have customer marketing perspective. If you buy it in, you need to know that you'll probably have to configure it or customize it in your own way. And if you rent it, which is typical as a bureau model, you're giving all your data to a third party. They'll build you a single customer view, and you have access to it. And the risk with the latter is that if you cease relationship with that bureau or that organization, they'll just pour the data back at you. There won't be any structure or schema around it that holds together. They'll pour it back at you. So you must understand, you must be clear if you are renting or buying, what do you actually own? Make sure that you own those blue pieces. So I realize that I've covered an awful lot of ground in the last 44 and a bit minutes. There's an awful lot there, and most of it is at a very high level. But before I hand back to Anthony, I'd just like to briefly recap some of the key messages that I've tried to get across in this presentation. Gathering data it's not enough. It must inform decision. It must be turned into information. Must provide wisdom. Ultimately, we just have a bunch of data. If you're going to do this and you haven't started yet, have really clear marketing goals in mind. Don't think that you have to take on the world. Start small, think big. So just get the bare fundamentals working first. Data comes from everywhere. People will throw data at you once they realize the value of what it is that you're building up. You don't have to put everything into the single customer view. If it has no value for what you're trying to achieve, don't put it in yet. Operational data is for operations. Marketing data is for marketeers. That's key. You have to change it. Transactional to customer perspective. Only your date of birth will stay the same. Don't forget that. So make sure that your processes and your merging and your matching rules will take into account a whole host of changes. And the very key one for me on the right-hand side there is memories define relationship. Perspective defines conversation. Without perspective, you cannot engage me as a human. Avoid duplicates and false positives. But if you have to err on the side of caution, go for the false positives. I've never ever worked with an organization who has 0 duplicates. Everybody has some. But clean data wins. every single time. If you outsource any part of your single customer view, be really clear on what you own. Just have the early conversation up front with the organization that you're working with and be clear on what you own. You could create some fantastic new wisdom, but personalize without being personal. There is nothing at all more freaky than receiving an email which is overly personalized. Dear Jim, we know that you're married and you have 2 children, one 7, one 11. We thought you'd like this. By this point, I am deleting the email and I'm freaking out. So don't over-personalize. Be generic, but be leading. And the final one on the bottom right-hand side is don't confuse big data with lots of data. A single customer view is a structured set of data. Big data is something else. Big data is all about a technological method of managing unstructured data across low-cost hardware, not the conversation we're having. Single customer view is a structured database. So make sure that if IT comes to you and says, yeah, we can use big data for this, you question why they're thinking that way. A single customer view is first and foremost the powerhouse of how you turn intelligence into wisdom. So to answer the question of intelligence versus wisdom, which is how we started, as a marketeer, I believe it's this. Intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. Wisdom is the quality of good judgment made to informed, considered decision. I cannot be informed without intelligence, but I can still make bad decisions with bad intelligence, and we want to stay away from it. Thank you very much for attending. I do hope the webinar, at the least, has helped you to maybe think about your data and your single customer view in a slightly different way. I'd like to now hand back to Anthony.
Thank you, Jim. That was very good. Before I get on to some questions, so there's been a few questions coming through, and for anyone who wants to ask some questions, there is a facility on the software that you're using today with GoToWebinar. So if you do have any questions, do fire them across. Before I get on to those, I do want to try and get Ed Mallin, the COO of List Services, onto the call. I know we had a few audio issues at the beginning trying to get Ed on, so bear with us. Are you there, Ed?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Jim. That was great and very helpful. As Anthony mentioned, I'm Ed Mallin, Chief Operating Officer of List Services, and we are delighted to have co-sponsored today's webinar with our partners at BlueVenn. Today's topic, Intelligence versus Wisdom, focused on the importance of the single customer view as the foundation of all your marketing activity. It will be your competitive advantage. Marketers like yourself need to have a 360 view of your customers, and the intelligence you have about them is your most important corporate asset. As Jim mentioned at the end of his presentation, how to manage big data and turn it into targeted, actionable information is what we explored today and is how, hopefully, we can help you going forward. We appreciate the time today that you took out of your busy schedules to be part of this discussion. Please feel free to ask questions, and we'll answer them as many as we can at this point in time. There will also be an opportunity for you to follow up with us for more one-on-one with more detailed discussions that fit your particular needs. We want this to be informative and interactive for you. With that being said, I'll pass it back to Anthony, who will host a variety of questions. We appreciate again your time. Hopefully this was informative, and we look forward to following up with you in the near future. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your time. Anthony?
Thanks, Ed. Glad we could get you on. I know we had some audio issues at the beginning. So we've got a few questions that have been coming in during the presentation. One of the questions, what different challenges are there for building customer view in a B2B environment as opposed to B2C? Jim, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. So it is slightly more difficult to get your head around the B2B database environment unless you've been in it for a very long time. And the reason for that is that there are no individual third-party data sources you can buy in to help you clean the data. If you want to buy data about me as an individual at my home address, you can get that from the electoral roll. You can get that from a number of different census marketing service providers. But if I work for a business and I give you my business address, you can't actually claim me at my business address and my phone number and all those things. So for the most part, you have to trust the information that you're actually given, and you have to go through other kinds of cleaning exercises. Most organizations employ people to ring up organizations and to actually check that they've got the right phone number. That's the first thing. The second thing is that organizations are connected to each other hierarchically. So although in a B2C world, you might have an individual who's at a premises, in the B2B world, you'll have an individual at a premises, which is a company that might belong to another company at another premises, and you need to understand the hierarchical buying pattern of the organization. That can pose its own problems. And the third thing, which is quite key, I guess, really, is that it's not just the customer can change, but the business can change too. Businesses change their names. Everything about a business might change as well. And you have to go back to the original question, which is, who is your customer? Is it the business or is it the contact? So there are challenges, but we've built enough B2B databases over the years so we can actually get around most of them, and we can eradicate a lot of the risk that goes with that.
Another one here, how can I best translate the benefits of the single customer view to my senior stakeholders to ensure buy-in?
Typically, it depends upon the job function being held by the senior stakeholder, but the majority of senior stakeholders will have the same objectives. They'll share the same kind of viewpoint. And if you ask them questions like, do you know how many customers we have? And do you know what the average value of a customer is? Do you know how much money we have to pay to gain a new customer to replace the customer that we've lost? And do you know the average amount of time it takes to lose a customer? If the answer to those questions is no, how can they possibly make the right decisions, right informed decision about their business? And the only thing that will tell them that is a single customer view. You don't get that information from anywhere else.
Okay. I've got another question here. It's from someone who is in the hotel vertical. How many data sources do you typically see coming into a single customer view in hotel chains? Is that something you can answer?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because that depends entirely upon the hotel chain. Some hotels, and clearly without speaking to this individual, it's quite tough, but as I'm speaking, hopefully the individual will recognize that this is the kind of conversation we would have. Some hotels actually have what's called local marketing, in that anyone that stays at that hotel actually can be marketed to by that particular hotel. Whereas some organizations have centralized marketing, in which anyone that stays at any hotel can be marketed to by the hotel central organizational marketing team. So that fundamentally changes it, because local hotel marketing has far fewer data inputs than centralized marketing. If you can imagine, for each hotel, you've got 3 inputs. Let's say you've got the customers that stay there. You've got what they buy in the restaurant, especially if you issue any kind of a card, or they can pay on their room. And third type might be use of facilities like spa or golf course or whatever else you have in the hotel. If each hotel has those three, the centralized marketing system will have three for each hotel they have. Only a truly centralized hotel chain where everything goes into the hotel centrally can you actually have upwards of 20, 30, 40, 50. Saying that, though, there are a number of organizations in Europe that we've worked with that are very big hotel chains that only have about 4 or 5. So it really depends on how many systems you have that hold data that allow you to improve the conversation with your customer.
Okay, we're just about to hit the 3 o'clock time now, so we've got time for one more question. If you've asked a question and we've not been able to read it out and answer it, we will be coming back to you directly, and we'll answer those either via email or by phone. I've got a question here about how many US-based companies are actually using this or using the product.
So our list services has 7 applications today that we provide and use the BlueVenn tool for our partners in various verticals, all the way from healthcare to technology to retail to publishing. So again, we've had a lot of experience in using tools of this nature, and we've been very pleased, and our customers have been very pleased with, one, the ease of use, its scalability, its reportability, and its ability to take in multi-channel information. As has been discussed earlier, the real exciting opportunity is to bring in multi-sourced information into your data or data mart, and being able to, as Jim talked about, getting a single view of the customer. And so that goes all the way from integrating data from your email service provider, could be from mobile applications, from direct mail, from affiliate marketing, from PPC marketing that you're doing today. So as we know, the landscape is changing dramatically every year, every week, in terms of what kind of data assets you're receiving into your data mart or your campaign management strategy. Depending on where you are with that, that's sort of where we see the opportunity here, and the ability to get someone up and running relatively quickly with strong discipline of business rules, and also obviously a big voice in most of these companies, the sales organization. Many are using Salesforce.com as their sales tool, and we could also integrate that information and link that to our tool here as well. So BlueVenn as a software application tool has really been a great opportunity for us, especially effective even in obviously large volumes of data, but it could work very effectively. Half of our customers are B2B as well as B2C. So we've been very pleased with where we are, and we're looking forward to that relationship expanding and growing over the next few years.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So I think that is going to conclude the webinar for today. As I said, if we haven't got around to answering any questions, I know there are a couple of people who are asking to see the tool in action. So those are probably things that we'll pick up on a one-to-one basis. You'll see on, well, just gone from the screen, there's Chris Kennedy, someone to contact, LSE. He's the Vice President of Sales. So there's some contact details there if you'd like to get in contact with Chris. And of course, what we'll do is we'll follow up with a recording of this webinar, and we'll send that to everybody so you can watch on demand. And nothing left to say, but thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, and we hope to be in contact soon.